According to the US State Department, candid and productive discussions were held in Beijing Monday, the latest effort to try and lower the temperature between both countries after two potentially dangerous military-related incidents in recent weeks. On the weekend, in the Taiwan Strait, a Chinese warship appeared to cut dangerously in front of an American Navy destroyer, which avoided collision by suddenly reducing speed. Last month, a Chinese fighter jet intercepted an American spy plane in international airspace. The White House says an increasing level of aggressiveness by China's military is to blame for both close encounters.
Won't be long before somebody gets hurt. That's the concern with these unsafe and unprofessional intercepts. They can lead to misunderstandings. They can lead to miscalculations.
And it seems these sorts of incidents are fueling animosity towards the United States inside China. And CNN's Will Ripley explains why.
On the streets, in the skies, and on the sea, rising rhetoric, and the U.S. warns real danger of military confrontation. A growing list of U.S.-China flare-ups, fueling fierce anti-American sentiment among the Chinese public. Chinese state media adding fuel to the fire, blasting the airwaves with outrage. Public perception of the U.S. plummeting. A recent Chinese poll reveals more than half of those surveyed have a very unfavorable or somewhat unfavorable impression of the U.S. The U.S. keeps picking on China, says this man in Beijing. It feels like the U.S. is bullying China. Another making his views clear. I don't like the U.S. All bad things in the world are caused by the U.S. U.S. polls show many Americans have similar views about China. Even in polarized Washington, countering Beijing has rare bipartisan support. From the Taiwan Strait to the South China Sea to Singapore, the U.S. and China seem to be spiraling closer to conflict. On Saturday, a near collision on the Taiwan Strait. The U.S. accused a Chinese warship of cutting off a U.S. Navy destroyer. The U.S. says both ships came within 150 yards, less than 500 feet of each other. The U.S. destroyer took emergency measures to avoid a collision. A close encounter U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin called extremely dangerous.
I'm concerned about, at some point, having an incident that could very, very quickly spiral out of control.
Austin speaking at this Asian Defense Summit in Singapore. The Pentagon says China rejected a proposed meeting with its defense minister, Li Shangfu. Their only interaction, this brief handshake. The U.S. says they did not have a substantive exchange. General Lee had plenty to say after the near collision, blasting U.S. claims of a peaceful passage through the Taiwan Strait with a Canadian warship. They are not here for peaceful passage, he says. They are here for provocation. Tensions already high, getting even higher. Just days earlier, over the South China Sea, a mid-air incident caught on camera. A Chinese jet dangerously close to a U.S. reconnaissance plane. The U.S. calls this an unnecessarily aggressive maneuver. China says it was just safeguarding its sovereignty, accusing the U.S. military plane of deliberately intruding into China's training area. The government spokesperson saying the U.S. should immediately stop such dangerous and provocative actions. Washington rejects Beijing's territorial claims over nearly all the South China Sea, saying the United States will continue to fly, sail, and operate safely and responsibly wherever international law allows. Tensions rising ever since a controversial Taiwan trip by former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi last year, and this year's meeting in California between House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and Tsai Ing-wen, president of Taiwan. China also claims sovereignty over the self-governing democracy its communist rulers have never controlled, launching 2 rounds of massive military drills near Taiwan, only adding to U.S. concerns of a potential military miscalculation with massive consequences.
The White House says that top U.S. officials did bring up the near collision at a meeting in Beijing on Monday. And just the fact that there is a meeting, that both sides are talking, is certainly a welcome development for those watching the situation in this part of the world, because animosity between the U.S. and China has been on the rise significantly in recent months, from Taiwan and the South China Sea to China's deepening partnership with Russia. That brief thaw when President Biden and President Xi met in Bali last November that was derailed by the Chinese spy balloon has resulted in an inability for both sides to have high-level talks. Perhaps the fact that there's a meeting in Beijing could signal a turnaround. Will Ripley, CNN, Taipei.